have probably heard it before that World War I started because a prince was assassinated. But that's only half the story. A single bullet didn't drag Europe into chaos. Powerful men did, through 5 decisions that closed every door except war. In just a few weeks in 1914, leaders across Europe made choices they believed were strategic, necessary, even defensive. Germany handed Austria-Hungary a blank check. Austria chose war instead of negotiation. Russia mobilized its massive army. Germany activated a war plan that guaranteed invasion. And Britain, bound by quiet promises to France, stepped in. Each decision tightened the trap. Each one removed another chance for peace. By the time the shooting began, Europe wasn't stumbling into war, it was marching toward it. So how exactly did these 5 decisions turn a Balkan crisis into a global catastrophe? Let's break it down, step by step. The German blank check. When people talk about how World War I began, they usually jump straight to the assassination in Sarajevo. But the real turning point came days later, behind closed doors in Berlin. On July 5th and 6th, 1914, Kaiser Wilhelm II and his chancellor, Theobald von Bethmann-Hollweg, made a decision that changed everything. They gave Austria-Hungary what historians call a blank check. In simple terms, Germany promised full unconditional support, no matter what Austria decided to do to Serbia. Now think about what that meant. Austria-Hungary was a fading empire. It feared Russia, which saw itself as the protector of Serbia and other Slavic nations. On its own, Vienna might have hesitated. It might have negotiated. But once Germany, Europe's strongest military power, stood firmly behind it, the fear of Russia suddenly mattered less. That promise removed the brakes. The leaders in Vienna who wanted war no longer had to worry about consequences. They didn't need compromise. They didn't need diplomacy. They had Berlin's backing, even if it meant war with Russia and possibly France. This is the moment a local crisis stopped being local. Germany didn't fire the first shot, but by handing over that blank check, it turned a Balkan dispute into a continental gamble. And with that green light from Berlin, Austria-Hungary made its next move. The ultimatum, designed to fail. Austria chooses war. With Germany's blank check in hand, Austria-Hungary moved fast, and it moved deliberately. This wasn't a country stumbling into war. As historians Richard F. Hamilton and Holger H. Herwig point out, Austria-Hungary's leaders were the first to opt for war in July 1914, and they did so with planning and foresight. They didn't want just an apology from Serbia. They wanted Serbia crushed as a political force in the Balkans. So on July 23rd, Vienna sent Serbia a harsh ultimatum. The demands were extreme. One of them required Austrian officials to take part in investigations inside Serbia, a direct attack on Serbian sovereignty. The deadline was just 48 hours. Serbia actually accepted most of the demands, almost all of them. It agreed to 9 out of 10 conditions and showed willingness to negotiate on the rest. But Austria-Hungary had already made up its mind. On July 28, 1914, it declared war anyway. The very next day, Austrian forces began bombarding Belgrade. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand was no longer the issue. It had become the excuse. This was the moment the shooting started. A regional punishment campaign was now officially underway. And once the shells began falling on Belgrade, another great power felt it could no longer stay on the sidelines, because Russia was about to make its move. The point of no return. Russia orders general mobilization. Once Austria-Hungary began shelling Belgrade on July 29th, the crisis stopped being just Austria versus Serbia. Now Russia was watching closely. Russia saw itself as the protector of Slavic nations, and Serbia was at the center of that identity. If Russia stood back while Austria crushed Serbia, it would lose influence in the Balkans and look weak in front of Europe. Tsar Nicholas II knew that. Backing down wasn't just a political loss, it was a blow to Russia's status as a great power. At first, Russia tried partial mobilization against Austria-Hungary. But here's the problem. The Russian military system wasn't built for half measures. Its war plans were designed like a machine. Once you turned the gears, everything started moving. You couldn't prepare only against Austria. The plans automatically included Germany. Military leaders warned the Tsar that delay would be fatal. If Russia moved slowly, Germany would strike first and crush them. Under pressure, Nicholas approved general mobilization on July 30th, 1914. In that era, mobilization wasn't defensive paperwork. It was widely seen as an act of war. Trains began moving troops. Reservists were called up across the empire. From Berlin's perspective, this was a direct threat. With one signature, the crisis crossed the point of no return. Germany now faced the nightmare it had always feared, war on two fronts. And that fear triggered the next decision. The war machine unleashed. Germany executes the Schlieffen Plan. When Russia ordered general mobilization, Germany believed the clock had started ticking. For years, German military planners had prepared for one nightmare scenario, a two-front war against Russia in the east and France in the west. Their solution was the Schlieffen Plan. The idea was simple but ruthless: knock France out quickly, then turn east to face slow-moving Russia. The plan assumed Germany had about 6 weeks before Russia was fully ready. So instead of attacking France directly along its heavily fortified border, German forces would sweep through neutral Belgium, circle around Paris, and crush the French army fast. But this wasn't just a military move. It was a political gamble. On August 1st and 2nd, 1914, Germany began putting the plan into action. By violating Belgium's neutrality, Germany guaranteed that Britain would have a reason to intervene. Britain had pledged to defend Belgian neutrality, and now Germany had handed London the justification it needed. What Germany saw as a defensive necessity looked like open aggression to the rest of Europe. A regional conflict was now spreading westward. France was pulled in. Britain was pulled in. The war machine had been activated, and once it started moving, it could not be stopped. Tied by secret promises, Britain steps into the fire. By the time German troops crossed into Belgium, Britain faced a choice. But in reality, that choice had been shaped years earlier. Back in 1904, Britain and France signed the Entente Cordiale. It wasn't a formal military alliance, at least not on paper, but behind the scenes, things were different. By 1912, British and French naval officials were secretly coordinating strategy. The understanding was clear: if war came, the British Navy would protect the French coastline, while the French fleet focused on the Mediterranean. These discussions never went through full public debate in Parliament, yet they created a moral and strategic commitment. Britain had slowly aligned itself with France. So when Germany activated the Schlieffen Plan and invaded neutral Belgium in early August 1914, the pressure became intense. Britain had long supported Belgian neutrality, and now it was being openly violated. At the same time, France, Britain's quiet partner, was under direct threat. Foreign Secretary Sir Edward Grey knew stepping aside would damage Britain's credibility and balance of power in Europe. On August 4th, 1914, Britain declared war on Germany. What began as a Balkan crisis had now pulled in the world's largest empire. 5 decisions, 1 chain reaction, and Europe was officially at war.